Hello, everybody, and welcome to part two of basic OverPower gameplay, brought to you by the OverPower GOAT, the greatest of all time, Marcel the OPGOAT. Yeah, that's right, that's me. High on the OverPower Mountain from the OverPower Mountain podcast is the words of wisdom. So I left you off at part one. We're starting our handoff here, and we're doing pretty well actually, from what I remember. We've drawn 8 cards. At this point, we've gotten an event that says no cards with a fighting icon may be used to attack. Again, in reference to this, remember events are very powerful, so no cards with a fighting icon. So I referenced earlier threat assessment on a character, and I referenced that one of their stats, which equates to the threat assessment in the old OverPower card game, that would be a fist. It actually visually looks like a red fist. So always think red and think fist, essentially. And that's what the fighting icon looks like. The energy icon, of course, being yellowish and looking like an energy blast. A little sort of like firework in your mind. The strength, so of course going energy, blow blast, fighting, little red fist. Strength right underneath, which is visually looks like almost like a dumbbell, an old school, comic book dumbbell with sort of like squarish lines instead of like a circle. And the last one, intelligence, literally just being the head of a dude, but it's blue. Brains. That sort of thought. I guess they didn't really want to put a picture of a brain there. Makes more sense of a visual of a human. So we got basically, think of the events. So now I mentioned there were power cards, universe cards, other sort of cards, special cards. So all of these cards, when they have like an attack on them or some reference to like that, they will visually have these icons on them. So when I say we have an event, no cards with a fighting icon may be used to attack, that means our opponent, and us of course, may not use any cards with that icon to attack. Now, of course, if your opponent is a fighting deck, they're devastated at this moment in time. Like I said, events are huge cards. But we, again, will divulge into that later on. So to sum this, getting to the venture part back, here we go. So we've generated cards, we've seen everything, we've put the event, we've placed all our cards. Remember, again, there's 5 slots. You have power card placing, you have universe card placing, you have special card placing, you have double shot placing, and then of course artifact placing. So we have all placed out all our cards. We saw that our opponent, basically discarded a 5, so we know that he has a 5, and he kept it in his hand, so we know that's one of his cards. So now we're off to the venturing phase. And, in part 1, I basically said that we could easily venture 2 here. And the reason I said that is because, if you do the card count, we still have all 8 cards. Doesn't matter where they're placed currently. And he only has 7. Now, that being said, generally we have 1 more card than him. So we have 1 more action than he does in this round. So with that being said, we get to the venture part again. So this is where we left off in part 1. So now venture essentially is the game of OverPower. Great venturers, funny enough, great venturers can create something out of nothing, can bluff using venture cards. You can show extreme strength that you may have, a particular 1 per deck in your hand when you don't actually have it, by venturing a lot and your character or your opponent thinking that you do have it. Venturing is a unique thing. So venture starts like this. Again, I started in part 1, but I'm going to start fresh here in part 2. So venture starts like this. You have 7 cards. Okay. Now they're usually aligned to some sort of comic book storyline that happened, i.e., Fatal Attractions, where the adamantium got ripped out of Wolverine by Magneto. Spoiler alert if you've never read the comic book or watched the new X-Men cartoon. Um, double spoiler alert if you didn't know that that was a comic book or the X-Men cartoon, because, my bad. So anyways, venturing. So you have 7 of these venture cards, and they, again, revolve around a storyline of comic book, but that's neither here nor there for the game. So these 7 venture cards allow you to make a wager on each round or each battle that occurs in an overpower game. So if you have all 8 cards, and all 8 cards are your highest cards, they're all 8s, 11s, 10s, 9s, 7s, and 6 teamworks and something like that, and your opponent discards half their hand, and then you see them place like a 1 ally and a 1 power card and a 4 make an additional or something low like that, and you're just like, wow, I'm going to destroy this person. I mean, you truthfully could venture all of them in one go. But there are, of course, pluses and minuses to this aspect. So that's why I'm starting off with venture, because this is a big, big topic, as it is essentially how you win or lose a game of overpower. So all 7 of them start in the reserve pile. So that's the middle pile in an overpower game. So now you're allowed to, on any given battle, bet up to 2 from either the reserve mission pile or the completed mission pile, which is the one above it. Okay. Now there's a little bit of rules. We're going to get to that in a sec. So starting the game off, they're all in the reserve. So you're allowed to bet up to 2 cards with what I'll say is free of charge. Now what I mean by that is because after 2 venture, so every time you venture more than 2 of those cards from any given pile, the opponent will get to draw a card for every one you venture. So if you venture 3, your opponent, or he or she, your opponent will essentially get to draw 1 more card. Now this is important because you have to outweigh, usually in overpower, what's known as card advantage. And now that's again what we were referencing earlier in the podcast in part 1 about placement and moving cards forward, cards in hand. Those are again things we're going to get to in a second here. But for venture, and in this reference, we are at a spot right now where we have 1 more card than our opponent. Okay. Now in this usual scenario, as long as we don't have a bunch of low cards or low venture cards or low venture numbers on our side. Now I mean that's a reference to the attacking value of a card that I have on my side of the board. So those are ones that we've placed. We have power cards. Power cards are 1 through 8. So again, you can reference like each one of those represents 1 point of venture if it lands on the opponent's side. So we've counted up, and again, generally if you have card advantage, you are probably in the lead, depending how your deck build sort of works. And again, we are in card advantage right now. Plus, of course, our event is out, and it doesn't hurt us, but it does hurt our opponent. And we can see that he can't use 2 more additional cards in his hand. So, we're basically 3 cards up on our opponent right here, right now in the first hand. So imagine how excited you are in a tournament that this just happened for you. And now we're at the venturing stage. So we have 7 venture cards. And now I said you can venture 2 easily here, no problem. And you're probably going to win, which, is a good strategy in the grand scheme. It's, the slow and steady wins the race kind of strategy. And depending on the strength of your deck, and what I mean by strength, I don't mean actual strength icon. I mean, depending on, the oomph of your deck can, continue rumbling, especially if you have card placement advantage going forward. So in this venture stage, I mean, you can do 2. And when I say you can do 2, you venture 2, and then it's your opponent's turn to venture. You're technically 3 cards up on your opponent. So no matter how great your opponent's cards are or how low yours are, you're basically in a really advantageous place here. Now, of course, someone like myself, who's a little bit more experienced in the game, might take this as like one of my real great moments of advantage in the game. And then I would basically take venture and I would look at it and I'd say, okay, well, he discarded one card and I know it's a 5, and this card can block the 5 in his hand, and I see he can't use 2 other cards, and his deck kind of revolves around fighting. So even if I give him a card when I'm venturing, he might not be able to use it. So there's percentages and things like that, like when you're watching poker on TV, those little percentages that go up beside hands, you're kind of having to try to work these out in your head. So no cards with a fighting icon. So he could draw an activator card that he only has attacks for, or he could basically draw a power card that's just a fighting card, or a multi-power card, something like that. So there's a lot of things, teamwork even. Which of course he would then have to discard, because if he can't, we're past the placing phase, and essentially he can't place that anymore, so he'd have to discard it. So there's a lot of things that I could sort of push this advantage. So someone like myself, depending on the venture count that I'd see on his side or her side, on my opponent's side, and then I would count what my side would have, and if I were like at least 8 or 10 venture up, I'd probably push the advantage here, and I'd probably minimum go 3, and if I had some sort of powerful cards or some sort of mechanics where I saw something even more advantageous, I'd even go 4, knowing that I'm 3 cards up, even though 2 of his are placed, or she's are placed, moving forward. I try to take advantage of this hand, and really push the game really strongly in my way. But of course, you could venture 2 safely here, and we're talking about venture. So basically, you can venture 1 or 2 from the reserve mission pile without any penalties, and then it's your opponent's turn to venture. Now, you have to watch out, because now you're playing the game of OverPower with venture. So this is where venture gets a little bit more complicated, because there are strategies involved in venturing. So one of the strategies that you'll see, especially when you're watching even tournament games on OverPower, is the place and run strategy. So opponents will often place 6 of their 8 opening cards, maybe 7 of their 8 opening cards, and then you'll see them venture 1. Now, as an opponent, you can usually read this pretty quickly, and you can go, okay, I'm going to venture 2, and they'll just give it to you for free. They'll just give it to you and they'll run. And just because they want to be set up, and giving you 2 doesn't really cost them much moving forward. Now, this strategy is good if they're playing some sort of long game, cards they're trying to get to, advantages they're trying to achieve through getting to battles 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. But of course, you're winning ventures, so you can always, get that God hand right after and push the whole strategy, and then the game's over. Thus is the game of OverPower, and how fast things can move and shake, even with depending on big whomper decks or events. So venturing again can get a little bit in a unique scenario, and it's kind of like, I like the Othello phrase. It takes a minute to learn, a lifetime to master. So those are the basics of the starting venture. Now, like I said, there is a lot of skill and technique in venturing, and we're going to probably spend a whole podcast just on venturing. So we're going to move it along here just to keep these podcasts a little bit short. So again, you can get through a battle, and you can basically get through a game of OverPower. So we're continuing on here. And we are at a part where we have ventured 2. So that nobody's drawn any cards. Your opponent is technically down 3 cards because he can't play 2 of them because they have fighting icons. And lo and behold, another one in his hand. So he ventured 1 and ran. Oh, funny. We just talked about that strategy. Funny how it happened just before your eyes in our fictional game we're discussing. So at this point, you discard your cards, you show them to your opponent, and you discard them into the appropriate either dead pile again for specials, universes, and so on other cards, activator cards. And then you also place the power cards in the power pack just left of it in that regards. Okay, so now it is round two. There was no battle. Look, we didn't even battle in round one. What a unique, weird game. We just placed a bunch of cards and then we said, okay, we're not even going to battle. We're just staring at each other, a la Braveheart style, just waiting for the hand or the flag to drop. So battle two commences. So we repeat again. Okay, we haven't actually played a battle with any venture. Our opponent just said, you know what, you get those two mission cards. And what happened by that is when we ventured the two, R2 went to the top, which is known as the completed mission piles. So it went just above the other reserve mission piles, so just above them. So now we have 2 in the top and we have 5 in the middle. Our opponent now ventured 1 and conceded. So we have 6 in the reserve and 1 in the defeated, which is basically at the bottom, just underneath the reserve pile. Okay, kind of like going heaven, going to hell, that sort of scenario, if you can picture that. So in this spot, we have the completed mission pile, the reserve mission pile, and then of course we have the defeated mission pile. Now, there are rules now, so we're still in venture. I know we just drew another hand in our fictional game, but I just wanted to explain this part of the venture because, this is as we're going to get into the next scenario. So we have reserve or completed at the top, reserve in the center where we started, and then defeated at the bottom. So in this part, we're going to say, to get up to the completed, you can venture always from the reserve, and it will go up to the top. And once you get all 7 to the top, you win the game. So as you can see, we're going to continue repeating hands until that happens, or you kill all of their characters, which is a lot more rare, but does happen in the game essentially from time to time, funny enough. If you play long enough, you will see it. It will happen to you, and you will do it to other people. But most of the time, game is won by venture, either winning all 7, time in the game running out, or your opponent losing all 7. All 3 happen continuously all the time. Sorry, took a second there. So, as we said, completed, reserve, and defeated. Those are the 3, and you just remember that, and you'll always continue forward moving in the game. And now we'll get back to it when I talk about venture in the next hand. So, we've drawn again, and then what we do is we draw 8 cards. Again, 8 total cards. So we draw 8 cards, the opponent draws all 8 cards. Now we're looking down, and we happen to have placed 5 of our cards in the last round, and our opponent placed 4 cards in the last round. So we're already 1 card up moving into this next hand on advantage just of placed cards. So we look at our hand, and we're just like, wow, we only have 1 duplicate this round. And what do I mean by duplicate? I mean, I looked down and we placed one of our 6 power cards on one of our heroes in the last round. And in this hand, we happen to have drawn another 6 power cards. So we're going to go, opponent, we've drawn 1 duplicate, a 6 power card, and we're going to place it into our power pack as a discard. So our opponent then will say, oh wow, I have 2 duplicates, duplicate, which gives us information as to what's in their hand now. And they're going to go, I have a duplicate power card as well, one that's not placed. So again, information that's in their hand. You always have to remember this when you're playing strategic games like this. Any information you can get is always the key to games like this. So here we go, and they've discarded 2 cards, a power card. We've discarded a power card. But of course, we already had 1 placed card over them, and now we have 1 additional card in our hand over them as well. What an amazing scenario to be again. Of course, we go any events, none from our side, none from their side. We're continuing on with the discards, and that's always the steps. So you always have to do the steps. You draw your cards, any events, no events. You have any events, no events. Okay, my turn then. Any discards, duplicates, and so on along those lines. So we're in round two, and we're back in our scenario, and we have two additional cards over them, and we've already got two up additional in our venture. So, and all our cards are pretty big at this point in time. One of them being a card that lets us draw additional cards, and our opponent is not playing any cards that can happen to stop this card, so we know it's going to go off. We look down and we say, okay, we're going to place a few cards because just in case this isn't the last hand, we want to try to keep this placing advantage moving forward, because we just showed in our fictional game, if you place cards, they get to stay and continue forward into future battles. But of course, they do fall under the discard and duplicate rules moving forward, where if you do get a second one of those cards you've placed, you have to discard it in future rounds. So there's advantage and disadvantage to doing it, and depending on the cards you want. So we're moving forward and we're placing a few more cards. Now again, you get the 5 placing card slots. So we're starting to place out a lot of our characters. Each one of them starting to get a special on them, a power card, and a universe card of some sort. Either an ally, a teamwork, a basic, or a training, or something, depending on what we've decided to build our deck with. Now, we're getting to a good place where a lot of them are placed out. And what do I mean by placed out? I mean, they've used all of their active place spots. Now, again, I don't reference that a lot of people use double shots, as we mentioned in part 1, as well as artifact cards are not usually main deck cards. There are other cards, like home bases, that allow you access to these certain cards that you could potentially use through home base activation. But I do reference in most main decks that they don't often play these. Again, if you do, look at that. You will already gain the advantage of placing a double shot or artifact card moving forward. Now, double shots, of course, do have an actual attack value and venture value to them. So there are obviously potential in them, depending if you could build the right deck around them. So in our fictional game, we've drawn, we've placed out, they've placed a lot of cards, but again, we're 2 cards advantage up on them, and we see we have a lot of our bigger cards now. So we're at the point now where we're back to venturing. Now we have advantage this whole time because our opponent conceded in the first round, so we always get to go first. So what I mean by that is when we're placing, we get to place first. Now placing works, of course, I place 1, you place 1, I place 1, you place 1. A lot of people, when they're playing the game, just place a lot of cards very quickly, but technically it's supposed to be 1, 1, 1, 1 as you're moving forward. So after the placing phase, we're back to the venturing phase, and it's your turn again. Like, you're having a great game here of OverPower. You're ahead in card count. You have great cards in place. You're already up on the venture side of things. Your game of OverPower is doing very well. Your deck's doing very well so far. But here we go. So it's venture time again. So you're up 2 cards in our fictional game as we're speaking. You have 1 placed card more than them, and you have 1 extra card in your hand as well after placing and so on. So in our fictional game right now, and you have big cards, so like you really think you could push the advantage here, as I spoke in the first game. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go 3. We're venturing 3 cards. So now we're venturing 3 cards, and what's happening in this scenario is we're giving them a card. through venture. So we're venturing 3 cards. Now we have 2 at the top, which is the completed, and 5 in the reserve. Now a lot of people are like, well, why don't you just bet from the completed? That way they'll just, if you lose them, they'll just go down to the reserve. You can't bet from the completed if you don't have any cards in the defeated pile, which is the bottom. So all cards always have to be bet from ventured from the reserve, which is the center mission pile, unless you actually have cards which are on the bottom. And if you do have cards on the bottom and you do have cards at the top, so in the defeated and the completed, then you can bet some from the completed to either bring the defeated mission to the reserve or to the completed pile after. So in our venturing fictitious game that we are playing right now, we have 2 at the top and 5 in the middle. We are at a 2-card advantage right now. Again, that's being placed cards on our characters and cards in our hand. Our opponent is 2 cards down on us, so we've counted all the cards that it could possibly count towards the hand, and again, we're up 2 currently. So we ventured 3. Our opponent is starting to shake in their boots. They're starting to see the writing on the wall. They're knowing that we are coming for their neck, as they say. So they get to draw 1 card off the top of their draw pile, or they can elect not to if they don't want to and they have a reason that they don't want to. And there can be a plethora of those that we'll go through many podcasts from now. But one, of course, being that they have an amazing event that they haven't drawn yet, and they don't want to take the chance that even that next card is that event, because it gives them that much advantage moving forward. Just, one of the many examples that could potentially be why they wouldn't want to draw. But in most situations, you're going to draw the card if it's very close. And remember, our opponent's only 2 cards down, so we're giving them the option to get only 1 card down. So our opponent elects to take the card. Of course they do. That means it's probably going to go down. We're only a card up in this round, but looks like they want to actually battle this round. Oh my God, your heart starts to pump. This is the first battle you're going to play in an OverPower card game since 1997. Get ready. Here we go. So, first things first in a battle. We have offense and we have defense. You have what's known as initiative because they conceded in the last round. Okay. Now, what do I mean by initiative? It means you get to go first. So you get the first attack or the first action in a battle. So now in our fictitious situation, I'm not going to go through every single play in this battle, but I am going to kind of just go through the quick ins and outs of a battle and why and what you're going to sort of see. So, in a battle, you have cards in your hand and you have cards that are placed. Cards in your hand, when someone concedes a battle, are cards that will get discarded into the discard piles. Cards that are placed are cards that will, again, of course, as we saw already in our situation, cards that will move forward should there potentially be another battle and no one has won the venture at the end of the round. So in our scenario, we are venturing 3. Our opponent is, drawn the 1 card. After looking at their card, they're still unsure, so they're just venturing 1. Because they think, we probably have another trump card in our hand. And as I told you earlier in this podcast, we do. We have a drawing mechanism card. And we see over that they have no active way to stop it. So here we go. We ventured 3. So now our first action. We're going to decide to do an offensive action. We're going to throw one of our universe cards that we've placed, known as a teamwork. Okay. Now, visually, this card has 2 icons at the top, and it'll say, the first one will say how much the character needs to use that special. So as I mentioned earlier, they do have an energy, fighting, strength, or intellect rating. And that rating does base how much a character, their ability to use teamwork cards. So now, for an example, it'll say 6 fighting to use. So now the character who's throwing that teamwork needs to have a 6 fighting stat, or higher to throw that teamwork. So they need to have a 6 fighting, a 7 fighting, or an 8 fighting stat, to have the ability to throw that teamwork. So with that teamwork, essentially what we're doing is we're throwing that teamwork at a character. Now, right beside the to use portion, it says what the actual active portion is. Now, teamworks in the old game are always 6. There's no situation where they're higher, no situation where they're lower. So a teamwork, which in this particular case is 6 fighting to use, will act as a 6 fighting attack. So we've thrown this now at our opponent. Our opponent now has to defend or shift the card. I do reference 2 different things because those are 2 actual terms that we will, of course, dive deeper into as we continue further. So we throw this 6 teamwork fighting attack at one of our opponent's characters. Our opponent then decides they either want to take it, which means it will hit the character's current record, or they want to defend it, which they can use a card then, either a power card, which can be used to attack or defend, to defend it, or a special card of some sort, either from a teammate or from themselves, which allows them to avoid the attack, or an activator card, which will activate a card from their battle site, which will be able to defend it as well. So there's a plethora of ways to defend it, or they could just take it for the sake that, for strategic purposes of that's the main icon of my deck, and generally a lot of my attacks will be that way, so that character will potentially have to be not spectrum killed, but cumulative KO'd. So again, there's a lot of strategies in OverPower, but we're just getting through the basics of a gameplay to get you started again. So in this scenario, here we go. We've thrown our 6 fighting attack. They have decided to block it with one of their power cards from hand. And then we have to, of course, always follow up a teamwork with a power card. So we decide to throw a multi-power card from another character. And what do I reference as a multi-power card? Those are power cards that they do go from 5 down. Now the 5 being a 1 per deck, as I mentioned earlier, so only 1 of them allowed per deck. The 4s, 3s, 2s, and 1s being as many as you want, actually. You could probably put 10 of them in if you had some sort of creative idea as to why. But generally, with the lower power cards, not too many in your deck, and a lot of them usually actually being multi-power cards. So they have every single icon on it: the energy, the fighting, the strength, and the intellect. And of course, being allowed to use them as any which way, shape, or form from your character, as long as your character has the initial attack reason. Now, what do I mean by that? Now, I've just thrown the 6 fighting teamwork, and the additional follow-ups are strength and energy. So now, with this multi-power card that I'm throwing, the follow-up gets an additional +1 from the teamwork itself. Okay, now this is just part of the OverPower card game. We'll go through deeper reasons, but if you're following this fictitious game, you will understand what I'm saying at the moment. So 6 fighting power card is played, or 6 fighting teamwork has been played, it has been blocked. We are now throwing a multi-power card. Now our character has to either have energy rating of the number of the multi-power cards. So it's a 3 multi-power card that we're throwing. So now they have to have either an energy rating of that or a strength rating of that for us to be able to throw this multi-power card. So Luckily, our character has an energy rating of 3, and the multi-power card is a 3. So it has, again, all 4 stats on there for that multi-power card. But again, we're using it as an energy attack currently. So what this means is as it comes to the opponent, it is coming as an energy attack. Now, they have the elect to block it as an energy attack. So it's a 3 energy plus a 1 from the teamwork. So it's a 4 energy attack at the moment for defense or shifting. Now, if they do not defend this multi-power card, it hits their current battle. So now for our case and reason, we're going to say our opponent decides it's a low card, I don't need to block it. I'm going to allow this 3 multi-power card to hit me, even though it's a 4 energy just to attack. When it hits his current battle. Now, or current record in the battle. So this character now has a 3 multi-power card attack on their current hits to battle. So now, what does that mean? It means that that now is any icon that card has to be to kill them. That's the color it is. Okay, now what do I mean by that? So now we're getting to a little bit of knowledge of KOing characters. So now a character can die in 2 different ways. Okay, a character can die essentially from 20 damage. So now we're talking about the number of attack on cards. Now we've already given a reference of several ones, which is the teamwork had an attack damage of 6, and the follow-up was a 3. Even though it got bumped, that was just for the attack, not for the actual venture or damage total. So in that scenario, the 3 hit, the 6 did not. So they have either 17 points to go to get them cumulative KO'd, or another way to kill characters is to get Spectrum KO. Now, Spectrum KO is when 3 different icons have hit the character. Now, it doesn't have to equal 20. Okay, it does not have to get all the way up to 20. It actually only has to have the 3 icons of any measure. So as we've done in our fictitious scenario here, the character on our opponent's side now has a 3 multi-power card on them. So now we have almost like a wild card spectrum on them. Even though it's low, it is any icon that we want it to be. So if we get an additional 2 icons on them, even if it's a 2 or 4 or 5, even though it won't equal 20, the character will still be dead because they will have 3 icons on them. Now, obviously, you know, the OverPower game has many twists and turns and different scenarios that can happen. So characters have inherent abilities that certain cards don't count. They have special cards that certain cards don't count. So there's always ways for characters to create scenarios where they're extremely hard to kill. So OverPower did create one thing, which is called the dead is dead rule. So no matter what, if they've built a character that cannot be killed with energy cards, cannot be cumulative KO'd, cannot be spectrum KO'd, even if both are on there, what you can do is the dead is dead. Now that means that you can have 20 points of total damage and a 3 spectrum kill on them, and then that character is dead. No matter what specials they have, no matter what inherent abilities they have, dead is dead. So we will get again further into this, but I want you to understand how a character can be killed and how a character the 2 different ways that a character can be killed, and for games to continue on. So if a character is killed either through spectrum KO, which is all 3 icons, or 3 different icons as there is 4, or cumulative KO'd, which is 20 plus damage, then that character will go off to the KO'd character pile, which is of course right beside your draw pile. and you will then, in the next battle, move your reserve character to the front line. In our scenario, again, we just have a 3 spectrum multi-card, or 3 multi-power card on the opponent's current battle for spectrum. So let's continue on. So it is now our opponent's turn to play. Our opponent plays a special card from one of their characters. The special card says, our character may not play any cards to attack for the remainder of this battle. It's a very powerful one per deck. Oh wow, we didn't see this coming, but luckily we have an activator card, which we will now use. So we will play the activator card and place it on our character as the defense. We will then pick up our battle sight, and again, we're going to get into all of this, people. So if you're a little bit lost right now, just continue on, follow the story. It'll all make great sense as we continue on with our further podcasts. So we pick up the battle sight, and in our battle sight, that character card has now matched a special card in our battle sight. Now, we've taken this battle sight, and of course, battle sights have very specific rules. They can only have one per deck, and no character card can duplicate in terms of special code. Okay, so you can only have one AO, you can only have one AA, you can only have one LO, you can only have one of any of these types of specials. So everything is a 1 per deck in your battle sight in your mind, okay? And you additionally get one per deck. So the character card must align with the card in your battle sight, and again, it's all about the character card special. So you can only have one of each in the battle sight. So we're going to get into all this as we continue on, but in this particular case, I do have a defense for this attack that my opponent has now played on me. So it correlates with the avoid attack in my hand. So I play this card and I avoid their attack, so my character may continue to attack. So now the next card out of my hand is one of the more powerful cards in the game currently, and it is a JW, and that's the card code that I just mentioned for the battle sight. So now this card is a 3 attack, may not be blocked with any special card attack by my opponent. So now this means that they are limited to only use power cards. Now, that's why I always say power cards are the lifeblood of a deck, because they can always be used to attack, defend. There's very little limitations. They can even be used with teamworks as well as with basic cards. So they are the game of OverPower, power cards. Remember that. And so as we move forward, I play this card over on my opponent, and my opponent's eyes just go wide because they weren't expecting this on this particular character, as they've placed a lot of their cards, and the cards in their hands are all activators or specials. So they just look down at that and they realize that they have not kept a power card to block this particular card. Now, not only does this special card that we're throwing right now at our opponent, it's a 3, but it's a 3 fighting. And our opponent, if you remember, already has a 3 multi-power card. So now this 3 fighting, our opponent has no way to block it. They take it. Now they have 2 of those icons on their character, and they are shaking in their boots, because not only does that 3 say that they can't use a special card to block it, and they must use a power card which they have neglected to keep in their hand and placed on their other characters, but it says may make 1 additional attack with a power card, and the power card also can't be blocked by a special. Funny enough, we happen to have a level 8 power card, a strength power card in our hand that our opponent did not see and did not expect coming. We throw this 8 strength power card down, and splat. We know, because he took the 3, that he can't block the 8. Now, of course, if you remember, I said it takes 20 to kill a character, or a Spectrum KO, which is 3 different icons. Now we have landed a 3 multi-power power card, a 3 fighting special card on them as well, and a level 8 strength power card. Now, total of all of that only equals 14. But because it's 3 different icons, and of course the multi-power power card being any icon we want it to be for our advantage, not for our opponent, that character's now dead. He had two special cards placed on him he had a special card and a universe card placed on their character as well. And both of those cards are now discarded to the appropriate piles. Not only did we just kill a character, but we just got a 2-card advantage again moving forward. This game is surely ours. Through the devastation of that play, our opponent has realized that they're in a really bad situation, and they concede the hand. Of course, placing 1 more card down to the defeated mission pile. Our 3 that we ventured, pushing this hand, knowing that we actually had even another powerful draw mechanic card that we knew our opponent couldn't block as well, which we didn't even get to play, which we discarded to the appropriate pile at the end of the hand. But of course, we won the 3 venture. Now we had 2 already in our completed top venture, and now we put an additional 3. So we have 5 total in the completed venture pile at this point in time, and we have 2 remaining to go to win this game. Our opponent now has 2 in the defeated mission pile, and they of course have 5 remaining in the reserve mission pile. Now they've lost a character. In this battle, they've now moved their reserve character to their front line. Now, we've gotten to a situation where a lot of our cards are still placed. We've used a lot of our cards from hand in these last scenarios that we've talked about. So we now have an extreme card advantage. We have 2 cards going up with our placed cards to their placed cards into the next hand. So we rinse and we repeat. And here we go. We draw an additional 8 cards. Now in this scenario, we're going to have to play the whole battle out because we keep all 8 cards. They keep all 8 cards. There's no event cards played. There's no discards. There's no duplicates. But if you recall, we're 2 cards up on them right now. So then we go and we place a few cards because, again, depending on if they have the advantage or a way that they could discard cards, you always want to place cards and try to keep advantage moving forward. Now, of course, remembering the basic rules of placing, of trying to place cards that won't duplicate as you move forward or are truly essential to your deck concept, idea, or character's life or death, being a big power card along those lines. So now we're in the scenario that we have a 2-card advantage. We've placed a few cards. They've placed a few cards. We have the advantage now. We have the initiative. We do our last 2 ventures from the reserve mission pile. None of our missions seem to have gotten to the bottom pile. What an amazing round. What an amazing game of OverPower we have done at this particular time. We start to play the round. We throw a teamwork. Another one of those teamworks that I mentioned, except this one is from our 8 stat character, and it says 8 fighting to use, but still only acts as a 6 fighting attack. Our opponent takes it. We then throw a 5 strength power card from another character to get an additional bonus of +2. It's a 7 strength attack currently for the attack. Our opponent blocks it with one of his special cards. Our opponent then plays a devastating card. Plays a card that attacks our character, and if it is successful, we must discard 4 cards with an icon of their choice, known as the Power Leech, the Grim Reaper, known by many names. This card hits. I do not have a card that can stop it. Wow. Devastation. The play. I wasn't expecting this. I thought the game was about to be over. I just ventured 2 for the win. What a twist and turn. Thus the game of OverPower we know. The card hits. I lose 4 cards. All of a sudden my opponent is now 2 card advantage over me. Not only that, I lost the cards I needed for defense for this round, and now all of my characters are susceptible to attack. I'm in a really bad spot. I have no choice but to concede. It's a tough choice in OverPower. And what do I mean by concede? I mean it's my turn to play. I am now able to do an action or an attack, or I can elect to concede. Now when you concede, you discard all cards from hand, and you only get to again have the placed cards in front of you moving forward. But I look down and I'm like, wow, I'm still 2 cards placed up, even though he devastated me by losing 4 cards, or she devastated me by losing 4 cards with that Power Leech. I go, there's still hope in this game. If I can just move forward, I have potential. I concede. So I discard all the rest of the cards from my hand, and I take my 2 and I put them to the bottom of my venture pile, in my defeated venture pile. Now again, that's at the bottom, so now I have 5 at the top, 2 at the bottom, none in the middle. My opponent has 2 at the top, 3 in the middle, and 2 at the bottom. The game seems like it could potentially have a change of momentum here. This is where the OverPower game can just all of a sudden change ever so quickly. My opponent and I go to the 4th battle, draw an additional 8 cards. Here we go. Wow. Luck is on our side. I keep all 8 cards. And I had a 2 additional card going in. Wow. Our opponent has a horrible hand. They have 4 duplicates of placed power cards and specials that they had on their team. Look at that. Here we go. Now the game's about to end. We know we can smell the blood in the water. We turn around and we decide at the end of the day, this is our time to shine. This is where the game ends. We place a few cards, they place a few cards. Again, remembering all the placing slots that you have. Then it turns around and we have 4 additional cards over them at this particular time. Here we go. This is our moment. We get to the venturing phase. How do we get those 2 from the defeated pile all the way up to the completed pile? Well, there's 2 different ways you can do this. You can either venture 1 from the completed pile, and for every 1 that you venture from the completed, which is the top pile, you may move 1 mission card 1 step from the defeated mission pile. So again, I venture 1 from the completed mission pile, and it will move 1 mission from the defeated mission pile to the reserve mission pile. Now if I venture 2 from the completed mission pile, the top one, I then will get the choice. I can bring 1 of the defeated missions up to the reserve, and then up again to the completed mission pile, or I can take 2 of the defeated mission pile and I can move them to the reserve. So you get basically, for every completed mission bet, you get to move a defeated mission 1 step. So in my fictitious scenario that we've created, we are 4 additional cards up on our opponent, Okay? And again, you get 2 missions for free without giving your opponent any advantage or cards. So in our scenario, what we have is we have 5 at the top and we have 2 in the defeated. So we have none in our reserve mission pile right now, but we are 4 cards up on our opponent. So what we decide, it's time to push. We bet 4 from our completed mission pile. Now what happens here is that if we bet all 4 and we win this venture, what happens is we get to move 2 of our defeated mission piles, defeated missions, all the way up to completed mission and win the game. So even though we had to run in the last hand, there was a reason and there was potential. And look at this. It just fell in our laps that now we're 4 cards up. So now with us venturing 4 from the completed, our opponent knows we're going for the win again. And they get to draw 2 cards from the top of their draw pile. So now they draw an additional 2 cards. And now the battle begins. Back and forth, back and forth. We're 2 actions or 2 cards up on them. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Offense, defense, offense, defense. When the dust settles, we have 1 character lost. And then there are no more actions to be played. They have another character lost. And there are no more actions to be played. What do I mean by that? I mean all the offense and defensive actions that both opponents had are played out at that particular time. Then what happens is you then count the venture total. So you look at all of the hits that hit in this particular battle and the current hits in each of the characters, and you total them up. So you count all of the things that attacked. So 6s, 3s, 4s, 11s, 9s, 8s, 5s, whatever the total is, you count it up, and whoever hit more on the opponent's side wins the venture total. Now this would happen every battle if someone didn't concede in the middle of the round or before the round. At the end of every single battle, you would count up the venture total, and this is how you would continue the game until one person wins all of the missions or one person loses all of their characters. Now, as we continue on, we will talk about what happens in Power Pack. Now, what is Power Pack? Power Pack is when you get to the point where you've run out of all of your deck, and you are only playing at that particular time with the power cards that you've put in your deck, because they get to recycle through and through. It's why you actually separate them throughout the game. We're not going to convolute this game for that. Should you get to the power pack, just remember that you continue the game the exact same way. It doesn't change how you venture. It doesn't change how you KO. Nothing changes. You continue venturing. You continue playing the game. You continue drawing 8 cards. The only thing that changes is that your power pack continuously, when you run out of cards to draw, gets flipped over and shuffled, and you redraw just from your power pack, and you just continue the game until someone either KOs all the characters or wins by venture total. So that, for you, my friends, is right from the mountaintop. That is the OverPower GOAT, giving you the basics of OverPower gameplay from the OverPower Mountain podcast. Thank you for joining me. I know part 2 kind of continued on, but venturing, understanding how you can continue through battles with placing advantage, just to show you basics of strategy as we move forward. And I just want to say thank you for joining me, and I hope you look forward to many, many more podcasts, and I will attempt to not ramble as much in the future, and but I think you may enjoy some rambles as we get into historic versions of Overpower and as I go into historic episodes and things along those lines. But coming up next, of course, is all of the smaller, more focused podcasts that we're going to go through. Power cards, universe cards, specials, venturing, KO methods, deck building, events and missions, any heroes or battle sites, home bases. We're going to get into it all, but those will all be individual and kind of get a little bit more focused and involved.